Hello and welcome to Botanical Biohacking. Today we're going to talk about menstrual disorders, dysmenorrhea, amenorrhea, and basically getting a woman's cycle on a nice, even flow. It doesn't need to be painful, it doesn't need to be excruciating or frustrating. In Western medicine, the understanding of gynecology is still, I'd say, a few hundred years behind what it is in Chinese medicine. So today we're going to start with some folklore, then get to the pharmacology and explore a couple of formulas that are extremely helpful for regulating menstruation. Both of these formulas have an herb that's very well known, and it's called dangui. In Latin, this is Radix angelica sinensis. Traditionally, dangui is sweet and pungent, so we already can deduce that it's warm in nature. It enters the heart, liver, and spleen channels. Because it's hitting the upper, middle, and lower portions of the body, it's a safe and effective standalone herb. If it were to only go to the upper body or only to the lower body, then it's not considered well balanced and would need to be combined with another herb that had what it lacked. Traditionally, this is said to increase blood and regulate menstruation. It helps to increase circulation and even alleviate pain. It's also used to help with constipation. This isn't cheeseburger constipation, this is constipation that you often see with people who are anemic. It's used clinically for anemia, irregular menses, painful menstruation, abdominal pain from cold, arthritis, and, again, constipation associated with anemia. We're going to go through an old folk tale, then look at the pharmacology of this extraordinary herb in the context of the formulas that have been tried and true for the last 1,000 years in East Asia. Billions of women have turned to these formulas for menstrual disorders, found relief, and passed on this information to the next generation. Listen closely. This could very well help a long-term fertility issue. It could help you with menstrual cramps and pain, and also by working with fertility, by working with the body as a whole, it can greatly help drive the forces that contribute to longevity. As we get to the pharmacology, you'll really see what this is about. Now, on to the folktale. There was once a lush mountain called Medicine Mountain. Although many potent herbs grew there, it was also home to snakes and predatory beasts. A young man in the village was determined to go to the mountain to gather the herbs. He boasted in the village that he alone was brave enough to go. His mother, however, wouldn't hear of it. She said, "Listen, you're my only son. I'm alone when you're gone. So if for some reason you don't make it back, who's going to take care of me in my old age?" Her son answered by saying, "Yeah, but Mom, I said I was going to do it. Besides, your future daughter-in-law was totally watching me. She thought I was cool and brave and handsome and..." "Child," his mom answered as she fanned herself in the heat, "you're as foolish as your father, Buddha rest his soul. I'll let you go on one condition. You best get married so maybe you'll do something right and have a baby to take care of me in my old age and rub my feet when my ankles swell." "Mama, that's nasty." "Boy, I'll beat you blue. I gave birth to you." "Sorry, Mama." His mother's plan was to delay the adventure until he had settled down. Everything went according to Mama's plan, but the villagers weren't having it. "Man, you're a punk. You said you were going to go get us all those herbs up on Herb Mountain, but you're too scared." He said, "Well, I have a wife now, so what's your point? Does this look like 1950s suburban America? What are you on about with this nuclear family nonsense? Your family comes first? Oh, well, hell no. You know the village comes first." He sighed, and he knew he had a responsibility to the village, and went home to pack. His wife asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to save the sick in the village and bring back the herbs." His wife said, "You know I love you, right? You know you have 2 left feet, and those snakes are going to crawl right up your pant leg and bite you on the behind. You have a wife now. I am your world now. You just, gosh, you don't understand," he said. As she saw he wasn't changing his mind, she started beating him. He ignored it, even though secretly it really hurt. Then she started crying, because although his intentions were good, he wasn't exactly athletic. With a little bit of a belly, there would be no Tarzan action swinging vine to vine. He's probably going to get bogged down in the mud and eaten. "What about me?" she asked. He said, "Okay, I talked it over with Mama. We agreed that if after 3 years I'm not back, you should remarry." "Remarry who?" she asked. "I'm related to half the village." He said, "Yeah, well, it's medieval China and we're cousins, so there's that." A few days later, he had provisions for his journey and set out, saying goodbye to his wife and mother. A year passed, and the wife heard nothing. Then another year. She fell into a deep depression because of sadness, worry, and eventually the worry harmed her digestion and her blood. She grew pale and as lifeless as a ghost. Finally, Mama said to her, "He's not coming home. I've loved you like my own daughter, and I can't see you living like this. Go back to your family and get remarried. I'll send a letter to the matchmaker telling her that you have been the best daughter-in-law ever." The daughter-in-law refused, but every day her mother-in-law persisted. After a month or so, the young woman packed and returned home. She was married off to someone else. A few days later, her husband returned. This is her ex-husband at this point, with several carts full of herbs. Everyone praised his bravery. When he returned home, he looked for his wife, and his heart grew anxious. His mother said, "She waited 3 years. She didn't get any news. She did as you said, and she remarried." "Crazy," he said. "This is just like Castaway with Tom Hanks. He's on that island with the volleyball." Mama looked at him blankly and shook her head, saying, "What kind of mushrooms did you find up there?" His wife got the news, and if 3 years of weeping had taught her anything, it was how to weep. Her new husband thought it was good her ex-husband was alive, but secretly thought it made for the worst honeymoon ever. Thankfully, he had other wives, so he shrugged it off and told her to go talk to the guy to get some closure. Her weeping was kind of a buzzkill to an otherwise upbeat household. They really were into music, and they would have jam sessions as a family. Very large family, so everyone had an instrument. You get the picture. So the young woman went to find her ex-husband. "Woe is me," the young Helen Hunt cried to Tom Hanks. "I feel as though a knife has pierced my heart." Then the young man said, "Yeah, well, I was fist-fighting snakes, so..." "This isn't a competition," she said. "Right. Sorry." The truth is that I found a lot of this super herb the locals were talking about. I thought I could sell it and buy you an LV bag and some Gucci shoes and that lake house you always talk about. This was more than she could bear. Her emotions were fluctuating. She was already pale and weak. She felt dizzy and fainted. When she awoke, she found that her ex-husband, Tom Hanks, had left her a bundle of herbs. She decided to try her luck at having an overdose and ate as much as she could. Her attempt at being Juliet backfired in the best way possible. After a few days, she had color in her face, her sleep was peaceful, her emotional state was better by the day, and her digestion was good. With an ordinary herb that goes only to one part of the body and in one direction, her plan to overdose would have worked. Because this herb goes to all parts of the body, the high dose was relatively restorative and it happened quickly. She settled into her new family and got really good at the zither. She still saw her former mother-in-law around festivals and swapped tofu recipes, and in time, youthful passion gave way to practical and harmonious life. Tom Hanks remarried a woman named Jenny with some blood disease, but his herbs weren't strong enough for her condition. Anyway, because of this story and its many variations, this herb is called dangui, which means that one should return home. This folktale is definitely not historic, so I was a little fast with the details. His name probably wasn't Tom Hanks, but the outline of the story, which has many variations, is pretty much the same. The key points are that worry is ultimately what has a lot to do with menstrual problems. There's a strong emotional component. Anybody who's alive on planet Earth knows this. Emotions affect menstruation, and menstrual problems can definitely affect emotions. The 3-year time period on this actually is a metaphor for the planting process of dangui. From the time you put the seed in the ground and sow dangui, it takes 3 years before the plant is ready to harvest. So that 3-year timeline, before he's ready to bring the herbs back, that's just a helpful reminder. Now, while this never happened, this herb is a powerhouse and the foundation to some herbal formulas that are today far ahead of Western medicine. I would go as far to say that without this herb, Chinese medicine would be very, very weak as far as gynecology goes. So let's take a look at the pharmacology and see how it works. The month after women give birth, in order to help rebuild blood, dangui will be added to chicken soup. Sometimes people cook it with beef. It has a very strong flavor. By itself, it's okay. But when you combine it with 3 other herbs to form a formula called suwutang, it becomes pretty impressive. This formula improves transportation and communication between cells. This is extremely vital because when this transportation and communication breaks down, that is what speeds up the aging process and leads to much faster death. It increases gene expression of cytokines such as TGF-beta to release the body's natural painkillers in the spinal cord. So for people who are having pain, menstrual pain, body pain, this formula can help turn down the heat on this. It signals gene expression of cellular antioxidants, and this goes from cell to cell, just releasing the antioxidant potential that's already contained within each cell but gets blocked. It's like a chain reaction. If you can remember the movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, when they release all the water on Mars and save the day, it's like that, only for the human body. So when we have all this inflammatory heat, and it's causing different menstrual problems or lots of inflammation from deregulation of menstrual cycles, this can cause a lot of irritability, and part of this is the oxidative effect. So by signaling all of the antioxidation, it literally just gears you down and cools your jets. This formula has regulatory effects on nitric oxide to further regulate cytokines and reduce pain. It increases blood vessel and blood cell production. It tends to do this through gene expression of the bone marrow primarily. Interestingly, it reduces itching and skin sensitivity. Sometimes after perhaps a long and difficult menstrual history, women will get itching on the skin and skin sensitivity, and this often gets chalked up as being part of fibromyalgia, but the skin sensitivity is associated in Chinese medicine with blood deficiency. Whether that truly has to do with blood factors, I don't know, but interestingly enough, the herbs that are used to build blood are also effective at reducing the itching and reducing skin sensitivity. So make of that what you will. Personally, I think that based on the pharmacology, it's something to do with immune function and oxidation affecting nerve sensation. Something like an early pain sensation. It begins as an itch and increases as the nerve further breaks down. It's speculative, I know, but based on the pharmacology, it seems to make the most sense. This formula is pretty extraordinary, and it was for its time. But over the centuries, they found that when you add 2 more herbs to this formula, it gets quite exceptional. When you add the herbs, Tao Ren and Hong Hua, it becomes a formula called Tao Hong Si Wu Tang. If you only use this formula, you could probably help 80% of menstrual issues. If you combine this with the foot soaks outlined in episode 1, then you could enjoy a very high success rate. So Tao Hong Si Wu has effects on painful periods, it has painkiller effects, and it regulates the secretion of plasma beta EP and uterus prostaglandin 2 alpha. It has effects on the cardiovascular system, improving microcirculation. It softens the arteries and prevents them from getting hard, and it also helps to make sure that the blood is filled with oxygen. It's a minor blood thinner, It's liver protective, anti-tumor, and it also helps to protect the nervous system. So for everyone out there who's menstruating, not currently, but I mean, it's still part of your life. If you find that you're getting painful menstruation, the first go-to for Chinese women, and Korean women and Japanese, and, well, also traditional Mexicans, is to make sure that you're not stepping on a cold surface. So you want to keep your feet warm. That's rule number 1. A heat pad on the lower abdomen or lower back can do wonders. This, I'm sure you already know. And then, while I can't tell you that this is a formula that you should take, talk to your acupuncturist, herbalist, whatever, what I will say is that it's such a common formula in China that you can buy it at the grocery store. And it's often added to chicken soup or just enjoyed as a tea. I say enjoy loosely, it has a very, very earthy flavor. But easily, most of my gynecology patients have improved dramatically from this formula. Even seemingly unrelated conditions. So maybe somebody says, I have throbbing pain behind my eye and my dreams are weird. And I'll say, okay, when did it start? Well, it started when I was a teenager. Okay. How long after you started menstruating? Well, I've always had weird menstruation is what they'll tend to say. Okay. And this carries on and it can set up a pattern for life. So even when women are done menstruating, if they've had screwy menstruation, the underlying processes of the cytokines and inflammatory factors are still out of whack, and that down the line tends to lead to more chronic pain and fibromyalgia type symptoms. So sometimes even down the line, a woman who's 60 or 70 who's had really, really wonky menstruation in her physical history will be getting all of these weird pains, and I'll use the same formula. Now, if you look on, the book or something like this, it'll say that this is for menstruation. People may say, well, I'm past that stage. Why do I need this? Because it doesn't directly affect menstruation. It affects the hormones, it affects the inflammatory factors and prostaglandins that will be that stick in the wheel of healthy menstruation. So this is an incredibly vital formula, very, very important. And it's also the basis for a lot of formulas for chronic pain. We live in a very sedentary age. A lot of people's blood circulation isn't moving like it should. This herbal formula is very, very useful for that. If I find on myself by looking underneath my tongue, the sublingual veins may start to get a little bit purple. If I'm not in a position where I have the ability to exercise, it happens sometimes, then I'll use a formula like this to help clean it out. Also, for people who have engaged in contact sports, martial arts, you get punched a lot, you get kicked a lot, you get slammed down. This causes a lot of microclots, and this formula is incredibly good for cleaning out those microclots and also to help restore blood after menstruation. So I mentioned 2 formulas. One is Suwutang and the other is Taohong Suwutang. So what is the difference between these two? Is one just a souped up version? Yeah, kind of. So Suwutang will mainly build blood. You can play with the ratio and make it move as well, but it's not that great for blood circulation. Taohong Suwutang is very, very good for blood circulation and it builds. It's very much an upgrade on the original formula. However, if blood circulation isn't called for, then Taohong Suwutang really isn't necessary. Suwutang by itself is very, very good with the gene expression of the endogenous antioxidants in the body, as is Taohong Suwutang. However, Suwutang doesn't affect prostaglandins the same way that Taohong Suwutang does. So if that's a factor, then it's better to go with Taohong Suwutang. Generally speaking, I would say the highest frequency for my personal use clinically is more Taohong Suwutang. So between those 2 formulas and using hot foot soaks, I'd say the majority of gynecology cases that I see are resolved within a couple of weeks. Now it's time for the monthly drawing. This month's prize will be Enlightened Tea. This is really high-grade tea that is incredibly good for both building blood and reducing stress and removing the effects of stress from the body, particularly digestion. This is a really wonderful go-to formula that it's one of those that I really couldn't live without. Also, I give it to friends and family who are traveling because it takes jet lag from, 1 to 2 weeks down to 2 days. It's incredibly good for this because it regulates melatonin. And this is different than taking a melatonin supplement. You actually need to regulate it. It doesn't always work to just add more. Okay, so I'm going to shuffle through and hopefully I'm going to pick your name. That is, if you took a screenshot of yourself reviewing our wonderful podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and send it in to us at botanicalbiohacking@gmail.com. Now, I know a lot of you out there have, reached out to me and said, "Oh, I really like the show, but, I haven't sent anything in." Well, then no prizes for you, and I want you to have prizes, so that hurts me deeply. Also, at the end of the year, we're going to be taking one of you to China with us to check out the herb fields and enjoy yourself. I don't know, get a foot soak. Ready? Now for the drawing. The winner for this month is Tom Heil. Good job, Tom. You won. Way to take the initiative. God bless you. We're going to have some enlightened tea sent right out to you, and in good time, because the timing on this is great. Because Eric Manstoff, who has the company Enlightened Tea, just told me that they're looking at selling out within the next month and may have backorder problems simply because it's getting so popular. So I'm going to make sure to reserve one of these just for you, Tom, before the piranhas come to skeletonize it. That's all for today. Thank you for listening to Botanical Biohacking. I'm Andrew Miles, and with me, as always, is Dr. Cho Shui Lan.